Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting of Government Operations to order. I know committee members just did a prayer with regards to our AOC meeting. Are members okay with moving forward without a prayer this morning? And okay. There's a couple things to add to the agenda committee. One is Bill 22. We wanted to discuss the date of clause by clause after this presentation. And the other one is committee members will have seen in their email inboxes establishing a working group to monitor implementation of the Indigenous employment policy. So we'll add those two items to the agenda. And with that, can I get a motion to approve? Oh, declarations of conflict of interest. Robert?
No, I was just supporting the motion to.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, so good morning.
No conflict.
Okay. And are we broadcasting live? Okay, great. So good morning, everyone who's tuned in. My name is Julian Morse. I'm the MLA for Frame Lake, Chair of the Standing Committee on Government Operations. Today's meeting is public and being live streamed on the Assembly's social media channels. Just before we continue, and mostly for our presenters who are probably not familiar with our process, just note that comments are directed through the chair, and that helps us control the audio-visual effectively. So please keep that in mind and wait to be recognized before speaking. I'll now ask members to introduce themselves, starting with members in the room. We'll go with Mr. Rogers first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Denny Rogers. I'm the MLA for Nuvik-Boot Lake.
Thank you. I am Kate Reed. I'm the MLA for Great Slave. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Richard DeJericon. I'm the MLA for Tunda de Willity. Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Hawkins online.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. My name is Robert Hawkins, MLA for Yellowknife Centre. I'm pleased to Zoom in this morning, and along with our millions of subscribers who follow the Legislative Assembly social media site. So it's always a pleasure to be involved. Cheers.
Okay, thank you very much. So today, as part of its study on the Northwest Territories Power Corporation's governance structure, we're welcoming Dr. Guy Holburn, Professor of Business Economics and Public Policy, and Dr. Adam Fremeth, Associate Professor of Business Economics and Public Policy, both from the Ivey Business School at Western University. So thank you for joining us, gentlemen. I understand you have a presentation, so please go ahead. And then we will go to questions from MLAs after the presentation. You have the floor, and I do hope I pronounce your names right.
Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you so much, and thanks for having us here. I'm going to open up the presentation, then hand it over to my colleague halfway through here. But what we're showing you here is some insight that we have from working in the area of the governance of publicly owned utilities in Canada and in other parts of the world as well. And this work is part of research that we do at the Ivey Energy Policy and Management Center at Western University. It's work that Guy and I have worked on for about 15 years or so, that looks at how Crown Corps are governed, best practices around that. Some work that we've done have looked at major projects that have been initiated by Crown Corps, as well as the governance of utility commissions and the economic regulators that oversee much of the electricity sector as well. And so the research that we're going to be talking about here, while it's going to reflect what's going on in Ontario, is something that we do see in many jurisdictions, and something that I hope will be informative as part of your committee's work for governance reforms that are going up north in the Northwest Territories. Okay, you just see some of the work that we have done and put out that is evidence-based, focused in on the facts of the research that we do here. So I'm going to give a bit of a thumbnail here of what the structure of the Ontario electricity system looks like. And so at the top you'll see that it's truly governed out of the Ministry of Energy. They set the overall policy for the sector through laws and regulations. They also have the ability to provide ministerial directives to agencies and organizations that are lower down in this chain here, which allow the Ministry of Energy to really enact policy change rather expeditiously. Underneath that, you've got two entities that are important within this sector. We've got the Ontario Energy Board on one side, which is the regulator, kind of like the Public Utility Commission that you have here, the economic regulator. They oversee the electricity sector and the natural gas distribution sector as well, approving and setting rates for residential, commercial, and industrial customers. On the other side is the Independent Electricity System Operator. And so we have a market-based system in Ontario, and the IESO is responsible for the planning and enactment of that market-based system, really ensuring that supply and demand is met here. So overseeing the generation side and ensuring that distributors have the power necessary to provide to customers. And at the final step down, you have sort of the series of players in the vertical chain of electricity generation all the way out to distribution. On one side, on the left here, you've got the generation players. In Ontario, we have the majority of our generation is coming from nuclear generated power and hydroelectric power. We also have green power and wind, solar. We also have natural gas produced power as well. And we have got a growing energy storage resource that is being built out in the province. And so on the generation side, the majority of power is generated by Crown corporations. Ontario Power Generation being the lead player on hydro, nuclear, and natural gas. And we actually have private investment in the Bruce Power nuclear power facility on Georgian Bay, which is actually owned by the province, but licensed out to a private entity, which is owned by investment institutional investor, as well as TC Energy, are the major owners of the Bruce nuclear power site. On the transmission side, you've got Hydro One, which is the main transmission organization. And when it comes to Hydro One, it is a publicly traded company, private company, where the province of Ontario, though, is the largest single shareholder. So it trades on the TSX. On the distribution side, which is where we're going to focus much of our efforts when talking about the governance of these entities, although we'll also talk about OPG as well. We have a series of local distribution companies speckled throughout the province, and I'll detail that even further in the following slides. And then we also have some private retailers that are out there selling power to customers through contracts, separate from what the distributors would be responsible for. And so we're talking about the distributors. You can see here the map of Ontario on one side, and we actually have 54 separate electricity distribution companies, or what we call LDCs, in the province. And this is a reduction from what was a peak of about 300 when we restructured the market here in Ontario in 1999 and 2000. So we've had significant consolidation over the years, but they range dramatically. We have some very small distributors that service about 1,300 customers to some that service more than 1 million. So, wide range in what we're looking at here. The median LDC in the province services about 24,000 customers. And if I've got it right, that's probably on par with Northwest Territories Power Corp. Most of these LDCs are municipally owned. Okay, so they're owned by the cities that they operate in, but they are for-profit corporations. Okay, so they are actually out there earning a profit with their rates regulated by the OEB, by the Ontario Energy Board, on a rate of return basis. They would go to the economic regulator every 5 or 6 years, seeking for a cost of service update. What I think is particularly interesting in this conversation, and perhaps for your purposes, is the evolution of these distribution utilities. So many of these LDCs have now diversified into unregulated activities. So outside of the regulation of the distribution of power and getting into sort of affiliated businesses, some that would have synergies or relationships with the distribution of power. And so you can see a couple examples here. On one side, you've got the City of Windsor that owns Windsor Canada Utilities Limited, which is the holding company that oversees both NWIN Utilities, which is the OEB regulated distribution utility, and then NWIN Energy Limited that has other related activities. On the other side, you've got a similar situation with Niagara on the Lake, where they have a holding company with a similar setup to what you have going on here. And a fair number of our utilities in the province have now expanded into this type of holding company arrangement with the municipality holding ownership over these. I want to drill into an interesting case that I think is worth considering more is the situation of Oakville Hydro. So Oakville is a town on the western suburbs of the Greater Toronto area, and they established the Oakville Enterprises Corporation that you can see there in the middle, which is owned 90% by the town of Oakville and 10% owned by Enbridge. And Enbridge, if you're unaware, is a major energy company both in Canada and the US. They're responsible for a significant amount of the natural gas transmission and storage within the country, but also have their own distribution gas utilities. And so what's interesting here with the Oakville situation is how much it's grown into these unaffiliated activities. So you can see on this lower level, Oakville Hydro on the far left is its regulated utility, but there are many, many more businesses that Oakville has expanded into, which vary significantly. Okay, you've got some engineering companies, you've got GTEL, which is a major utility location company. If you're going to be drilling in your backyard, you got to call this company up and they're going to come tag your yard. And so they own that business, metering business. They also have a significant renewable power generation business as well. And so in 2023, the holding company, OEC, had revenues of $480 million, only 10% of which came from the distribution utility. The remaining all came from these unregulated affiliated businesses. And that led to a $6.1 million dividend to the city, which would be far greater than what the city would get if it was just focusing on the regulated business that Oakville Hydro would be doing through its distribution of power. I think the other interesting point that I want to make here before I hand it over to my colleague is, Enbridge's involvement in this business. Okay, because these are for-profit enterprises, we have seen some activity of sales of shares of these to private businesses like this one in Enbridge. In 2022, Enbridge bought into the corporation, and at the time, the discussion in the markets was that this was to provide an equity injection, not for the regulated operations, but for OEC here, the holding company, to expand its footprint beyond what it was doing with just the distribution of power. So I'm going to pass it over to Guy now, and Guy's going to sort of get into more around the governance issues and what this means in these types of arrangements.
Okay, thanks, Adam. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the committee. So I'll make a few remarks about the corporate governance arrangements for the LDCs and also for Ontario Power Generation, which Adam mentioned is one of the larger power generators in the province. So LDCs are regular for-profit business corporations. That's how they're legally constituted. And they have a relatively arm's length relationship with their city shareholders. So most of the LDCs are owned by the municipalities. So this means that the main role of the city councils is to appoint the directors and the boards of the LDCs. Generally, we see LDC boards of about 6 to 10 directors. And the majority of these are independent directors, and about 25% are councillors or mayors. And of course, we've got some variation here across LDCs. There's a mix. It's not, of course, a strict 75-25% rule. That's just the way that it works, that it's worked out in terms of the numbers. You see some LDCs that have got 100% independent board, like Oshawa and Oakville, and you see some other LDCs that have got a greater skew towards the elected politicians being on the LDC boards. So with this mix, then, one of the questions that Adam and I have addressed is, does it matter? Are there implications from having a greater mix of independent directors versus political directors? And to try and understand, are there some differences in terms of preferences over business strategy for the LDC between political independent directors? So we have dug into this through some academic research. A number of years ago, we surveyed all of the LDC directors in Ontario. That's about 400 of them. And we asked them a number of questions around their preferences regarding LDC strategy. And we found some quite marked differences. So one of the key things that jumped out is that the political directors, so these would be the councillors or mayors who are sitting on the board, they tend to prefer higher dividend payments to the city over reinvestment in the LDC in a situation where there's an increase in profits in the LDC 1 year. Secondly, they expressed a greater willingness to expand into unregulated businesses. This was a bit of a surprise to us, and there are a number of potential explanations for this, which we can discuss later. And thirdly, the political directors were more willing to acquire another LDC and to merge into and to grow. They were less willing to sell their LDC to another entity. So these results are broadly consistent with political directors putting greater weight on policy or political goals than independent directors. And so we might think that this would then have implications for how an LDC develops its strategy if there's a dominance of one type of director over another. Adam, if you go to the next slide, please. So just to dig into this and to come back to Oakville. And the reason why we're talking about Oakville here is that Oakville Hydro and its related holding company have been particularly entrepreneurial over the last 20 years or so. And they're one of the LDCs that's really generated the most growth and the most value for the shareholder within Ontario. And that's been achieved through expanding into a broader range of unregulated but related businesses. And corporate governance is part of the story here. So when we look at the board of Oakville Hydro, it's a 7-director board, and all of the directors in this case are independent. And we've thrown up the names here, but these are individuals who've got extensive business experience in roles within finance, within the legal profession, within construction, and so forth. So these are all skills that are relevant for Oakville Hydro. And there's also overlap with the Oakville Enterprises Corporation. This is the holding company that oversees both Oakville Hydro and all the unregulated affiliate businesses. And the chair of Oakville Hydro is also the chair of the holding company board too. And when we look at the board of the Oakville Enterprise Corporation, again, we see a dominance of experienced independent directors who are able to steward and to support the company. So this is the type of board, or rather I should say these are the types of boards that are able to nurture and to oversee that extensive growth and development of the corporation and delivering value to the shareholder, both through business growth and through dividends over an extended period of time. Let me turn now to Ontario Power Generation. So as Adam mentioned at the beginning, Ontario Power Generation, along with Bruce Power, is the generating part of the electricity sector in Ontario. We have a vertically disaggregated system, unlike in the Northwest Territories where you have a vertically integrated utility. Ontario Power Generation is a Crown corporation, so it's wholly owned by the province of Ontario, and it operates the hydro, nuclear, and natural gas assets. So it has a board which consists of 11 directors, and all of the directors are independent directors. And again, they bring extensive professional experience in different energy, in different sectors, including energy, infrastructure, natural resources, financial services. And it's also worth noting that 3 of the directors are based in the United States. And the reason for that is that these are executives or former executives at US utilities with nuclear engineering and nuclear power expertise. And given that's part of the portfolio for OPG, this is an important skill set to include on the board. So we've got a business-oriented, commercially experienced board, but of course this is a Crown corporation. And so the way that the government keeps the corporation aligned with its policy objectives is through a written memorandum of agreement with the corporation. And so this memorandum agreement, the current one was written in 2021, so these tend to be longer term documents, but these specify the mandate of the corporation. And it's interesting to note that the mandate includes both commercial and policy objectives. And here what I'm doing is I'm just highlighting elements of these 2 sides of the mandate. So on the commercial side, the expectation is the corporation will operate assets efficiently and cost effectively. OPG is expected to earn a commercial rate of return, and it's expected to generate new revenues on a commercially sound basis, so then that it can deliver value to Ontario's ratepayers and taxpayers. And then on the policy side, the government has also included various elements. There are 3 or 4 key elements where the corporation board is expected to deliver as well. So this would be to undertake generation development projects and support the province's energy planning priorities and initiatives, to support the province's economic development objectives, and then thirdly, to pursue generation developments with Indigenous communities for mutually beneficial commercial arrangements. So this memorandum of agreement is an important mechanism for the government to keep OPG's activities and strategy aligned with those twin government objectives. And because this is written down, it's very clear this is a structured and predictable way for OPG to stay aligned with its shareholder. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and just say I hope this presentation gives a little bit of an insight in terms of the structure of Ontario's electricity system and how that's reflected also in the corporate governance arrangements, both of the distribution side and also on the generation side. So let me pause there, and Mr. Chair, we'll pass it back to you for any questions coming from committee members.
Sure, thank you very much for the presentation. I'll turn it over to committee now. Does anyone have questions for the presenters? Go ahead, Ms. Wayne Armstrong.
Thank you for the presentation. Electricity distribution utilities in Ontario. You said there's 54 local electricity distribution companies, ranging from 1,300 to more than 1 million customer. I just wanted to ask, these 54 local electricity distribution companies, does all these, do they have boards? Or are they using only, just board of directors? I just wanted to know if each of these have board of directors, And how many of those are Indigenous companies? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Holburn, for questions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So to respond to the first question, yes, each LDC, local distribution company, has a board of directors. And the reason for that is that they are constituted as legal business corporations under the Ontario Business Corporation Act. And so they have a legal responsibility, the shareholders have a legal responsibility to appoint directors. So even though there are some very small LDCs, they also have the same type of board of directors with the same legal responsibilities to oversee the corporation. Thank you also for the question about the Indigenous representation. My understanding is that there are some LDCs in Indigenous communities. I don't have specific information on the constitution of directors. Perhaps Adam has some information on that.
Yeah, thanks, Sky. There are some Indigenous-owned LDCs in Northern Ontario, Attawapiskat Power, Fort Albany Power, and there may be others. I'm not sure on their governance. This is something we could follow up on if that was of interest to the committee.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Whalen Armstrong, follow-up?
Yes, that is good. Yeah, because they do have James Bay Hydro, and it's right on the Indigenous land, so that's why I was asking too, with reference to that. Yeah, so corporate governance of Ontario power generation, that is an equivalent to what we have here. Is it the NWT Power Corporation, NTPC?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm not do the presenters have an answer to that, or?
Mr. Chair, I can jump into that. So the similarity here, I think, is that Ontario Power Generation is the Crown Corporation. It owns generation assets. So unlike your power company, it doesn't own transmission assets. The corporate governance has, or the board structure has independent directors. And they also have responsibility for appointing the CEO. And I know that in some other Crown corporations, it's the minister who has responsibility for appointing the CEO. In this case with OPG, that's the responsibility of the board of directors.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Mr. Rogers next for questions in round one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. And, given that it is a Crown corporation, similar to what we have here in the territory, you're independent, you're local independent. The boards obviously are appointed then by the minister. Has there ever been any cases that you're aware of where the government itself would have a member on that board, whether that be a DM or ADM sitting on the board with the board of directors? We had a case in our territory where the actual entire board at one point was made up of deputy ministers. I'm just curious if you're familiar with that scenario down there. Thank you.
Thanks. Over to Mr. Holburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm unaware of the history of Ontario Power Generation's governance arrangements. It may be in the past that there was some either politicians or civil servants who are sitting on the board. As I noted, they don't at the moment. Let me ask my colleague Adam if he has any information on that or other examples.
I think the one insight that I do have on this is, at least at the municipal level, and if you think about that as a publicly owned utility, we do have LDCs in the province, and very large ones, where the majority of the board members are city mayors. And so that is something that we see. The other thing that we do see along the lines of a DM or an ADM perhaps, is that in many cases, the chief administrative officer for a city will be on the board as well. And so that is typical to see a CAO on some of these utilities. And some of these utilities that are dominated by political board members, it can be very large. So an example would be Electra, which is a utility in the Greater Toronto area. I think it may actually be the largest distribution utility in the province, is dominated with political appointees, mayors or CAOs on their board of directors.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rogers, do you have a follow-up?
I do not know. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jericon, I have you next.
Yeah, I want to say thank you for your presentation. That was very informative. I have maybe a couple quick questions here for you. I just want to do a comparison. I know in Ontario they have a big population and they got different types of technology over there in terms of how you generate power, etc. My question is, in the northern parts of Ontario, in the smaller communities where they got power generation, how is the power generated? Is it diesel? And can you let me know what the rates are for that? Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Mr. Holburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There has been a move over the last number of years to try and switch communities that are currently reliant, these are remote communities, from diesel to bulk transmission. And the government has been investing in a number of northern reaching high voltage transmission lines to reach these remote communities so that they are not reliant on diesel, which has been the traditional form of power generation for these communities. Some of them have developed solar generation as well, but the general trend has been for the government to support these investments in transmission. Okay, I'm afraid I don't have information on the rates that are paid by these remote communities. I would expect that with the transmission lines coming through, there would be some implications there, but I'm not sure in terms of whether that would be an increase or a decrease.
Thank you. Mr. Jericon?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And what I didn't hear, though, is that what you're telling me is that they get high voltage power lines that are going from the main power generation source and going to, say, to a smaller northern community. Do you have any power generation that's generated in the smaller communities separate from high power lines coming into the community? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Holburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I just clarify the question there? Are you asking whether there's generation coming from the communities and being fed into the transmission line? Or are you asking about the source of the power generation technology that is being transmitted through to the remote communities?
Thank you. Mr. Jericon, you want to clarify?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to help clarify, I guess what I'm trying to say is in the smaller communities in Northern Ontario where there's no high power lines coming into the community in the smaller communities there, is there any communities there that have generators in the community that provides power to the community? I just asked that question. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Holburn, does that clarify things for you?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My understanding is that it's diesel power that's the main source of power generation for these remote communities that are not connected to the transmission network. Let me ask my colleague, Adam, if he has any more information on these remote communities.
Yeah, I think that's my understanding as well. I mean, there are some projects that have been quite prominent in Northern Ontario. I think it's the the Wate project that has linked together a number of these remote communities. And I think the idea is to try and bring more renewable projects up into that area. There, I could follow up with more details on that as well. And from my understanding, that has been done in partnership with Fortis, which is a large utility company, actually based in Eastern Canada and Atlantic Canada, that has sort of come across the country and provide further services for communities like this.
Okay, thank you. Any other members who haven't asked questions yet have questions for round one? Ms. Reid, that'd be you. Mr. Hawkins, no? Okay. I had a question or two for round one myself. I think what strikes me from your presentation is just how complex the system is. And one of the questions I would have is, so there's all these different utilities run by municipalities which own them. I was surprised to see that. It's very novel compared to what we're doing here. And one of my questions is, does this mean that depending on which municipality you live in, you could be paying quite different rates, or are rates regulated across the province, or is everybody getting different power bills from totally different utilities, and it really depends on what community you live in, what you end up paying for power? Because I do remember just seeing on the news a few times, people talking about their hydro bills, and a woman in tears, I remember at a particular political function, just talking about her power rates have gone through the roof. So is there any homogeneity across these various utilities, or is it just every person for themselves? Either of you
Mr. Chair, who would you like to go first? I can jump in here, Mr. Chair. So yes, we have 54 distribution utilities. They account for approximately, so the distribution element of that overall electricity bill is around, let's say, 25%. So the majority of the electricity bill consists of the energy charge. So this is the power generation charge. Then there's a transmission element, which would be another 20 or so percent. You've got some regulatory charges in there. So even though the distribution element will vary from one municipality to another, it's a relatively small fraction of the bill. It's about 25%. And yes, the distribution rates do vary a bit across the province. Some areas there's a higher cost of service. For example, if you've got a less dense population, there's likely to be a higher cost on average than the more dense areas. We've got a greater density of the assets. But the energy charges, so the cost of power generation, that's equal across the whole province. And it's the same for transmission too as well. So these are common. We do have a time of use electricity pricing structure, so that it's more expensive during the on-peak hours than off-peak hours. And so this is designed to encourage residents to try and cut back during these periods when there's limited capacity on the system.
I'll just
I hope that gives you a little bit of insight into how the bills are structured.
And I'll just add in that, as I suggested, there's a significant variation in who these 54 utilities are. And so you're correct that you could be on one side of Toronto and get your bill from one company, and be at the north end of Toronto and be serviced by an entirely different company, and you're maybe just 20 minutes apart from one another. Some other work that Guy actually had done and that I supported looked at the difference in transparency across these 54 utilities, local distribution companies as well. And there's wide variation in their transparency and governance, as you could see here as well. And so, it is a pretty complex system, and the fact that we've gone down from 300 to 54 is an advance, but there's a lot of work out there and what further consolidation in the sector in Ontario could look like as well.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I would have is, have either of you noticed any trends or indicators related to how rates relate to how a utility is being governed. So there's for-profit utilities. I don't know, maybe they're all for-profit. And then there's the various different, there's some that have political membership. That's a new one to me that, we have administration membership on our corporate governance, but I haven't seen, a situation where actual politicians serve on the board. So you noted a few differences, and I'm curious if you noticed between these various governance structures that exist, are some of them more effective at keeping rates low? Because I mean, at the end of the day, that's what residents here are most worried about. It's what's the bill that I'm paying, and I have to assume that that's the similar argument that goes on in Ontario, that people could care less if the company's making money if it means that their bills are going up. So I'm curious, have you noticed one kind of governance or aspects of governance are better at assisting residents with keeping their bills affordable?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a great question and an important one to ask, and it's something that we have also thought about a lot as well. A couple of observations. In terms of the efficiency and rates and so forth, we haven't found any marked differences. It's not something that we've looked at statistically yet, but the responsibility of the Ontario Energy Board as the regulator for the LDCs is to make sure that all of the LDCs, irrespective of their governance structures, are operating efficiently, and to make sure that the rates are reflective of efficient operations. So there's that external agency oversight, the OEB's equivalent of your PUB. That's the job of the regulator, to keep rates at a reasonable level. I would say that the difference that we have seen between the LDCs which are dominated by independent professional directors versus the LDCs that have a higher level of political representation through councillors and mayors is around the expansion and growth of the LDC into unregulated sectors and to nurturing that growth in competitive markets. This is where having that independent business-oriented board set with the skills, the experience to provide that oversight, that's where it can be extremely beneficial for a senior management team to then work in conjunction with affiliate organizations and so forth, and to expand into these related areas. So we've seen growth in a number of LDCs like Oakville Hydro, Oakville Enterprises Corporation is one example. Another very good example is with EPCOR, which is the municipally owned entity in Edmonton. And this has gone through a remarkable transformation over the last 20 years, turning from a municipally owned, vertically integrated electric utility now into a corporation that has investments throughout the United States. It's expanded significantly across Canada as well. So it's generated an enormous amount of business growth under the guise of an independent board. And the City of Edmonton has benefited from this through steadily increasing dividend payments to the city. And I think I heard at one point there was a statistic thrown out that if the City of Edmonton wasn't receiving these dividends from EPCOR, then property rates would increase by about 10%. So there's a meaningful creation of value for the shareholder through this type of business growth. Let me ask if Adam wants to add anything to that.
No, I'm good with that.
Thank you. And with the committee's indulgence, I just wanted to ask one final follow-up on that point. Can you just help us understand what you mean by expanding into unregulated areas? So I'm a layperson very much so when it comes to the Ontario system. So when you're talking about moving into unregulated areas, I think that what you mean is areas outside of power distribution, but can you help us better understand that?
Yes, that's right. So, for example, this could be expanding, for example, into solar power generation. These are not directly regulated in the same way that electricity distribution assets and operations are. We have the example of GTEL. So GTEL is the utility locate service, and Oakville Enterprises runs this organization providing utility locate services across the province. This has been a rapidly growing part of their business, construction design services, and so forth. So these would all be activities that have got some relationship to the core distribution engineering service, but they operate in competitive markets and they're not regulated by the utility regulators because they are competitive services and products.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, committee. I'll turn it back to committee now. Does anyone have another round of questions for the presenters before we wrap up the presentation? Okay, thank you very much. Seeing none. With that, I wanted to thank both of you, Drs. Holburn and Fremeth, for coming and appearing before committee this morning. This concludes, yeah, I just, before I conclude the public portion of the briefing, I'll turn it over to you if you have any closing comments you wanted to share.
I don't have anything, but thank you very much for the invitation, and I hope this discussion has been helpful for the committee in its deliberations.
Okay. Thank you very much to both of the presenters. This definitely was informative and interesting to learn about how it's being done in other jurisdictions. It's certainly a lot more complex in Ontario than what we have here, and interesting to learn about how it's being done there. So thank you very much for appearing before committee. This is going to conclude the public portion of the meeting. So thank you to everyone out there who has tuned in, if there is indeed anyone tuned in, for observing the meeting. And colleagues, I'm just going to ask that you stay as we go in camera to debrief and go through some committee business. So thank you very much, everyone, and we'll close the public portion of the meeting.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.